Before the rivers changed their course and the bricks of ziggurats fell to dust, there was a city of gardens, temples, and laws. Babylon, rising from the banks of the Euphrates, was more than a city of conquest. It was a place where voices were inscribed into clay, where laws were etched in stone, where myths were sung in palaces, and where gardens whispered silently in the dry winds of Mesopotamia. The story of Babylon is not one of noise and triumph, but of silence. Its gardens, whether real or remembered, are among the world's most famous mysteries, said to have floated like green steps into the sky. Its laws, carved into stelae by kings like Hammurabi, stand as some of the earliest attempts to bind human life with order and justice. Its myths, copied onto clay tablets, tell of floods, creation, and gods who rule both heaven and earth. Tonight, we will wander softly through Babylon, not as conquerors or archaeologists, but as dreamers. We will hear the faint scratch of styluses upon clay, the whisper of reeds in irrigation canals, the echo of laws read aloud in market squares, the hush of gardens swaying above terraces. We will not hurry, for Babylon is gone, and what remains are fragments, whispers, and silence. But silence itself speaks. So settle into stillness. Let the river of time flow backward. Let the walls of Babylon rise once more in your imagination. Let the silent gardens bloom, and let the forgotten laws whisper their weight. This is not the tale of victory, but the lull of memory. Every city leaves its memory somewhere. For Babylon, that memory was not carved in marble or painted on papyrus, but pressed into clay, within temples and palaces. In rooms that smelled of dust and oil, scribes worked quietly, their hands steady, their eyes fixed on tablets. Each mark they pressed into soft clay was a voice preserved, a thought hardened, a silence transformed into permanence. Without them, the life of Babylon, its prayers, its contracts, its laws and myths, would have drifted away like smoke. The scribes were the keepers of memory, guardians of silence, preserving Babylon's soul and earth. The priests guided them, for knowledge was never separate from the sacred. Within the temples, where fires burned before statues of gods, priests oversaw not only offerings and hymns but also records. They managed temple lands, tallied tribute, tracked the cycles of stars. To do so, they relied on the scribes who copied and stored the words of heaven and earth. Together, priests and scribes formed the silent custodians of Babylon, unseen by many, yet essential to the order of all. Imagine entering one of these temple archives. The room is cool, lit by oil lamps flickering against mud brick walls. Wooden shelves line the sides, stacked with clay tablets wrapped in cloth or placed in baskets. There smells faintly of earth, of oil, of time itself. At low tables sit scribes, their reed styluses tapping steadily into clay, each stroke deliberate. Their voices are hushed, if heard at all, for the work is sacred. On them lies silence, broken only by the faint scratch of stylus against clay. The tablets themselves were varied. Some held lists of goods, barley delivered, sheep counted, silver weighed. Others carried hymns, prayers written for priests to chant in ceremonies. Still others recorded myths, stories of creation, of gods and heroes copied carefully from older tablets. Astronomical observations filled shelves too. Lines of stars and planets tracked night by night. Each tablet was small, but together they formed a library, a web of memory stretching across centuries. Picture a young scribe at work. His hands are steady though his heart is anxious, for he is copying the Enuma Elish, the creation epic. Before him lies an older tablet, cracked and worn, its signs faint. He leans close, tracing each wedge, reproducing it carefully upon new clay. His reed stylus moves steadily, his breath slow, his focus complete. On him, other scribes work in silence, copying contracts, recording debts, calculating the movement of stars. When the work is done, the tablets will be dried and stored, placed carefully on shelves, their voices sealed for generations. The priests, too, relied on this memory when omens were read, when stars were charted, when rituals were performed. They consulted the tablets. A sheep's liver inspected in sacrifice was compared to patterns inscribed long ago. The rising of Venus was checked against records of its past appearances. Each omen, each sign, was tied to memory, to the silence of clay that spoke when consulted. The priests whispered their interpretations, the city listened, and order was maintained. But these archives were fragile. Fire could harden clay, preserving it for millennia, but water could dissolve it in an instant. Conquerors sometimes plundered archives, scattering tablets, erasing memory. Time itself wore down baskets, shelves, walls. Many tablets were lost, their voices silenced. Yet many survived, buried beneath rubble, forgotten until rediscovered centuries later. To hold one today is to hold Babylon's whisper, faint but enduring, its silence broken once more. The scribes themselves were rarely remembered as individuals. Their names were small in history, yet their work was immense. Without them, Hammurabi's laws would not endure, myths would vanish, prayers would be forgotten. Their lives were quiet, spent in silence, yet their voices shaped the very way we remember Babylon. Each stroke of the stylus was an act of faith, faith that memory mattered, that silence could be given form, that clay could carry eternity. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine sitting in one of those archives. The lamp glows softly, the shelves loom above, the air is cool and still. You hold a tablet in your hands, its surface rough, its mark steady. You trace the lines with your finger, feeling the voice of a scribe long gone. Outside, Babylon hums with life, markets, gardens, temples. But within this room, there is only silence, only clay, only memory. In that silence, you hear Babylon's heartbeat, steady and eternal. Babylon was not only a city of walls and gardens, laws and markets. It was also a city of skies. Night after night, as lamps dimmed and the Euphrates shimmered under the moon, Babylonians lifted their eyes upward and listened to the silent language of stars. For them, the heavens were not empty, they were filled with signs, messages, and rhythms that bound gods and humans together. The quiet movement of planets, the sudden blaze of a comet, the first glimmer of Venus at dawn, all were voices that spoke, if only one knew how to read them. The priests of Babylon became watchers of the night. From the tops of ziggurats and temple roofs, they observed the sky with steady eyes, recording the rising and setting of stars, the path of the moon, the shifting brightness of planets. They pressed their observations into clay tablets, filling shelves with long records. To us, these may look like lists of numbers and signs, but to the Babylonians, they were a dialogue with heaven itself. Imagine a priest atop a ziggurat at night. The city below is dark, its lamps few and scattered. The Euphrates glimmers faintly, its waters murmuring. Above, the sky stretches vast and endless, filled with stars. The priest leans on the parapet, a stylus in hand, a tablet beside him, watches as Jupiter rises, bright against the horizon. He notes its position, its time, its brightness. His lips move in a whisper, a prayer or a chant, linking what he sees to omens remembered. Each observation is more than data. It is a thread in the great web of meaning that binds earth to sky. The stars, they believed, reflected the will of the gods. A king's fate might be read in an eclipse, a harvest foretold in the rising of Venus, a city's future seen in the dance of constellations. Priests trained for years to read these signs, memorizing thousands of omens. If the moon is seen with a halo, rain will come. If an eclipse occurs in this month, a king will die. The tablets preserved such wisdom, an archive of heaven's voice, a silent library of the cosmos. Picture an apprentice learning this craft. He sits in a temple courtyard, a lamp beside him, a clay tablet on his knees. An elder priest recites omens, his voice steady, his memory vast. The apprentice repeats them, pressing the signs into clay, his hand trembling at first, then steady. Above them, the stars shine, silent and immense. The boy feels their presence, as if the gods themselves are watching, their voices hidden in the glitter of the night. Yet astronomy in Babylon was not only omen but order. By tracking the stars and planets, the priests created calendars, guiding the cycles of planting and harvest. They divided time into months, years, and hours, aligning the rhythms of human life with the rhythms of the sky. Festivals were set by the moon, sacrifices timed to celestial events, daily prayers guided by the rising sun. Babylon's very heartbeat was tuned to the heavens. In later centuries, their observations became remarkably precise. Babylonian astronomers could predict eclipses, chart planetary motions, and measure time with accuracy. Their work, preserved in clay, influenced Greek and later Islamic science, shaping astronomy for millennia. Yet their approach was never purely mathematical. To them, the sky was sacred. Each calculation was also a prayer, each number a reflection of divine order. The silence of the heavens was filled with meaning. Imagine standing in Babylon at dawn. The sky glows pale, the last stars fading. Priests descend from the ziggurat, carrying tablets of fresh observations. Farmers prepare their fields, merchants ready their stalls, children wake to begin their day. All is ordinary, yet all is bound to the heavens. The rising sun is not just light but a god returning. The fading stars are not just points but voices. Retreating, the silence of the sky lingers, vast, eternal, yet close enough to touch. The Babylonians remind us that silence need not be empty. The heavens spoke without words. Their language written in light, in rhythm, in time. To listen was to be patient, to record faithfully, to trust that meaning would emerge. In their tablets, the stars still whisper, their patterns preserved in clay, their silence enduring. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine lying upon the roof of a Babylonian house. The mud brick is warm beneath you, the air cool above. The Euphrates murmurs softly nearby. You gaze upward at the stars, bright and countless, scattered like jewels across velvet. Somewhere atop a ziggurat, a priest is watching too, pressing signs into clay. Listening to the same silence across millennia, you are joined in that moment, united by the silent heavens. A city as vast as Babylon could not exist without kings. Walls needed defenders, temples needed patrons, canals needed overseers, and markets needed order. Yet the kings of Babylon were more than rulers. They were symbols. They carried on their shoulders the silence of law, the memory of gods, and the weight of a city that looked to them for both justice and protection. Their palaces stood not far from temples and markets, reminders that power, sacredness, and daily life were woven together into one fabric. Hammurabi was among the first to shape Babylon into empire. But he was not the last. After him came rulers who raised palaces, repaired walls, and built temples in honor of gods. Later centuries would bring Nebuchadnezzar II, the name most often remembered, whose reign gave Babylon its splendor of gardens, gates, and ziggurats. These kings were not merely administrators, they were the bridge between heaven and earth, chosen by gods to carry order into human silence. Imagine walking into a Babylonian palace. The walls are built of mud brick, faced with glazed tiles painted in blues and golds. Lions stride across their surfaces in long processions, their forms outlined in shining glaze. Gateways rise high, arched and adorned, their bricks stamped with the names of kings. Within, courtyards spread wide, shaded by awnings where scribes, officials, and guards move with quiet purpose. In the inner chambers, the king sits upon a throne, not golden but heavy with presence, his robe of fine linen, his crown of metal gleaming faintly in lamplight. The king's duties were endless. He heard petitions from subjects, judged disputes, commanded armies, and supervised temples. He appointed governors, collected tribute, and ensured canals were dredged and fields watered. But beyond these practical tasks, His greatest duty was to uphold justice, the sacred order between gods and humans. In Babylon, law was not only practical but divine, and the king was its living embodiment. Picture a morning in the throne room. A farmer kneels before the king, complaining that his neighbor has moved a boundary stone. A merchant petitions for payment of a debt owed. A builder is accused of negligence after a house collapsed. The king listens silently, then speaks, his words steady, his judgment rooted in the laws carved in stone. Scribes record the decision, priests nod in approval for the people. The king's voice is not only command but justice, binding, silent, enduring, ritual-bound kingship as much as law. Festivals saw kings humbling themselves before the gods, entering temples to pray, offering sacrifices, walking in processions that reminded all that power flowed not from men but from the divine. In the New Year festival, the king was stripped of his regalia, slapped by the high priest, and forced to weep before Marduk's statue, proving his humility. Only then could he be restored to his throne, his reign renewed for another year. To rule was not to dominate but to serve. Silence. The silence of gods, of justice, of cosmic order. Palaces, though grand, were also fragile. Built of brick and wood, they required constant repair. Their walls glowed with murals, their courtyards bustled with servants, yet time wore them down as surely as it wore down huts. Many kings built, others rebuilt, each leaving behind stamped bricks and fragments of inscriptions. Today archaeologists unearth these fragments, piecing together the whispers of reigns long past. A stamped brick with Nebuchadnezzar's name, a tablet recording Hammurabi's decree, small voices of power, preserved in silence. The kings of Babylon were often remembered not by their faces but by their acts. Hammurabi for his laws, Nebuchadnezzar for his walls and gates, Nabonidus for his devotion to the moon godson. Their individuality fades, but their presence lingers in the shape of the city, in the myths told, in the ruins unearthed. Power was not about personal glory, but about weaving one life into the silence of many. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine standing at the foot of a Babylonian palace at twilight. The walls glow faintly, the lions on glazed tiles seem to shimmer in fading light. Within, the king sits in silence, weighed not by crown alone but by responsibility. Outside, the city hums softly, markets closing, lamps being lit, prayers whispered in temples. The king listens, speaks little, but in his silence lies the balance of order. Babylon endures through him, fragile yet unyielding, remembered not in noise but in whispers across time. Every great city has a threshold, a place where the outside world ends and the city begins. For Babylon, that threshold was no ordinary gate. It was a marvel of stone and color, a passage into silence and grandeur. The Ishtar gate, built under Nebuchadnezzar II in the 6th century BCE, it rose not merely as a defense but as a symbol, a shining statement of power, devotion, and beauty. To approach it was to feel awe, to walk beneath it was to step into a realm where gods and humans met in quiet procession. The Ishtar gate was faced with glazed bricks, brilliant in color. Deep cobalt blues covered its surface, like the night sky made solid. Across this expanse strode rows of lions, their bodies golden, their jaws open, their manes curling. Between them marched bulls, their horns sharp, their forms muscular. Dragons too, composite creatures with serpent bodies, eagle talons, and lion heads, wound their way along the walls. Each figure gleamed, catching the sun, their silence powerful. Together they formed an army of sacred guardians, watching over the city. Imagine approaching the gate as a traveler. The sun is high, the plains wide and dusty. You walk along the road, and suddenly the blue walls rise before you, towering above the earth. The lions seem alive, their golden forms glowing in the light. You pause, silenced not by command but by awe. The gate is not merely stone, it is presence, grandeur, memory made visible. Through the Ishtar gate stretched the processional way, a road lined with walls of the same dazzling brick. Along these walls, more lions strode row upon row, their bodies gleaming as if in endless parade. During festivals, statues of gods were carried along this way, priests chanting, musicians playing lyres and drums, the king himself walking in humility. The city gathered to watch, their voices hushed. The processional way was not just a road. It was a corridor of silence, where humans and gods moved together. Picture the New Year festival. The crowds gather along the processional way, their robes bright, their faces eager. Musicians play, drums beating softly, trumpets sounding faintly. Priests carry statues of gods, veiled and shining, their steps steady. The king walks with them, his crown lowered, his humility displayed. The lions on the walls seem to stride beside the procession, their golden forms glowing in the torchlight. The crowd watches, their voices low, their hearts bound in reverence. It is not noise that fills the moment, but a vast silence of devotion. The gate itself led into the heart of Babylon, to palaces, temples, and markets. To pass through it was to move from the dust of the plain into the order of the city. For travelers, it was a welcome; for enemies, a warning; for Babylonians, a reminder that their city was not only strong but sacred. The gate was dedicated to Ishtar, goddess of love and war, whose lions adorned its bricks. To step beneath it was to enter her domain, protected by her guardians, watched by her gaze. Ishtar Gate was more than architecture. It was memory pressed into stone, myth made visible. Each lion was not just an image but a symbol of divine protection. Each bull spoke of Adad, the storm god; each dragon belonged to Marduk, Babylon's great deity. Together they turned the gate into a silent hymn, a prayer in brick and glaze. To walk its processional way was to walk through theology itself, where gods guarded every step. Yet like all of Babylon, the gate was vulnerable. Time, conquest, and neglect wore it down. Its bricks fell, its colors faded, its grandeur buried. Centuries later, archaeologists uncovered its remains, shipping many to museums far from Babylon. Today, parts of the Ishtar Gate stand reconstructed in Berlin, its blue bricks glowing once more beneath quiet lights. To stand before it now is to feel a faint echo of its past, a whisper of Babylon's silence preserved across millennia. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine walking the processional way. The lions stride endlessly beside you, their golden bodies glowing against blue walls. Ahead, the Ishtar Gate rises, its arch immense, its guardians waiting. The crowd is hushed, the air filled with the scent of incense and flowers, the sound of soft drums. You walk slowly, each step echoing faintly. The gate towers above, silent, yet alive, a threshold between worlds. Babylon greets you, and in its silence, you feel its majesty. Babylon's strength was not only in its walls, its gates, or its palaces, but in the steady flow of water that sustained it. The Euphrates, broad and slow, was the heart of the city, its silver ribbon winding through plains of dust and heat. Yet rivers alone do not build civilizations. It was the canals, the ditches, the channels carved patiently by human hands that turned Babylon into a place of abundance. Through water, fields bloomed, gardens flourished, and markets filled with grain. The city was not only of stone and brick, but of flowing silence, carried by canals that murmured through its land. From the earliest days, the people of Babylon learned that water must be guided. Canals stretched out like branches from the Euphrates, some wide enough for boats, others narrow as ditches winding between fields. Levees held back floods, sluices directed flows. Reservoirs stored water for dry seasons. Farmers bent low along their edges, planting barley and wheat, pressing seeds into moist earth. Children splashed in shallow channels, their laughter mingling with the murmur of water. Life was tied to these canals, their steady rhythm as essential as the beat of the heart. Imagine walking along one of these canals at dawn. The air is cool, the sky pale, Farmers lead oxen to fields, their wooden plows cutting furrows in the soft soil. Women carry jars, filling them at the water's edge, balancing them on their shoulders as they return home. The water glimmers faintly, reflecting the first light of the sun. Reeds sway gently, birds wheel overhead, and the sound of frogs croaks softly. It is not the grandeur of palaces or the awe of temples, but a quiet, enduring beauty, the silence of life flowing steadily. The canals fed not only fields but gardens. Along their edges, date palms rose, their tall trunks swaying, their clusters of fruit heavy. Groves of pomegranate, fig, and olive grew in watered soil, their shade welcome in the heat of day. Within the city, small gardens bloomed in courtyards, watered from jars drawn from nearby channels. The legendary hanging gardens, if they existed, would have depended on such systems. Their terraces green only through careful management of water lifted high by hidden devices. Whether grand or humble, all gardens whispered the same truth. Without water, Babylon would fall silent. Canals also carried boats, linking Babylon to distant lands. Traders floated goods downstream, jars of oil, baskets of grain, wool, and dates upstream. Boats brought timber, stone, and copper. The river and its canals formed a web of connection, drawing distant places into Babylon's orbit. At landing stages along the banks, workers hauled goods ashore, scribes marked deliveries, merchants haggled in shaded stalls. The flow of water carried not only crops, but voices, ideas, and memory. Picture the city from above. The Euphrates winds like a serpent, leaning in the sun, from its spread canals, straight and curved, threading through fields along their banks, rise villages, farms, and gardens. The city itself straddles the river, its walls high, its gates glowing, its ziggurat rising above all. Within, smaller channels flow quietly, feeding fountains, filling cisterns, sustaining markets. From afar, Babylon appears not only as brick and stone but as water shaped into order. The work of water was constant. Canals silted up and had to be dredged, floods broke levees, forcing repairs. Dry years demanded careful management, disputes over water settled by scribes and judges. Yet the people endured, maintaining their lifelines with patience. For them, water was both gift and burden, a blessing that brought life, a force that demanded labor. The silence of the canals was never empty. It was filled with the sound of effort, of hands shaping nature into survival. Babylon's kings knew the importance of water. In inscriptions, they boasted of digging canals, restoring channels, building reservoirs. They declared themselves guardians of abundance, chosen by gods to keep fields fertile. Their names were stamped on bricks, lining canal walls, reminders that even in silence, power flowed. Yet the true guardians were the farmers and workers whose hands kept the water moving, whose quiet toil turned rivers into life. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine sitting by a canal at sunset. The air is warm, the water glows gold, the reeds whisper in the breeze. A farmer leads his ox home. A woman balances a jar on her shoulder. Children chase each other along the bank. The city hums faintly in the distance. But here the world is still. The water flows softly, carrying silence. With it, carrying memory, carrying life. Babylon endures not in noise but in the murmur of its canals, steady as breath. A city does not live by walls and canals alone. Its heart beats most strongly when its people gather, when the ordinary rhythms of farming, trade, and craft pause for moments of joy, reverence, and unity. In Babylon, festivals marked the seasons, the gods, and the turning of time. They were not only spectacles but rituals of renewal, moments when silence and music, devotion and joy bound the city together. The most famous of these was the etched, the New Year festival, celebrated in spring when barley ripened and rivers swelled. It was a time of renewal for the land, the city, and the king himself. For days, Babylon stirred with preparation. Temples were cleansed, statues polished, hymns rehearsed, farmers brought offerings of grain, shepherds brought lambs, merchants brought gifts. The city's streets filled with the hum of anticipation, a quiet undercurrent of excitement. Imagine the morning of Euphrates. The sun rises over the Euphrates, casting golden light on the Ishtar gate. Crowds gather along the processional way, dressed in their best robes. Priests emerge from temples, carrying statues of gods veiled in cloth, their steps slow and steady. Musicians follow, their lyres and drums striking soft rhythms. The air smells of incense, flowers, and freshly baked bread. The city is alive, yet hushed, each sound woven into a greater silence of reverence. At the center of the festival stood the king. On one day, he was stripped of crown and robe, brought before the statue of Marduk, Babylon's great god. There, the high priest struck him lightly across the cheek, forcing him to weep. This ritual was not humiliation but renewal. By showing humility before the god, the king's rule was cleansed, his authority renewed. Only then was he restored to his throne, dressed once more in his regalia, his reign reaffirmed. The people watched in silence, knowing that their world was bound to this act of humility and restoration. Picture the moment. The king kneels before Marduk's statue, tears on his cheeks. The high priest lifts his hands, reciting hymns that echo through the temple. Outside, the crowd waits, the city holding its breath. Then the doors open, and the king emerges once more, crowned, clothed, his face steady. The people cheer softly, but their voices are reverent. The silence of the ritual has passed, replaced by the quiet joy of renewal. The Etched was not the only festival. Others honored Ishtar, goddess of love and war, with processions of flowers and music. Shamash, the sun god, was celebrated with hymns at dawn. Seasonal festivals marked harvest and planting, the cycles of earth woven into the cycles of heaven. Each festival carried both joy and solemnity, reminding Babylon that life was not only toil but also celebration, not only survival but communion. Music filled these days. Drums beat steadily, lyres strummed softly, flutes sang high, dancers moved in circles, their steps echoing patterns of stars and seasons. Children laughed, flowers were scattered, bread and beer were shared. Yet beneath the joy was always reverence. Each song was a hymn, each dance a prayer, each feast an offering. Festivals were not escapes from silence, but expressions of it. Moments when the city remembered its place between gods and earth. Imagine walking through the processional way during a festival. The lions on the walls gleam in the light, flowers hang from doorways, incense drifts in the air. The crowd moves slowly, singing softly, their voices blending with drums and flutes. The king passes, priests carry statues, musicians play around. The city feels both alive and still, a harmony of sound and silence, devotion and joy. You walk with them, your steps part of the rhythm, your heart part of the silence. Festivals also carried memory. Hymns sung each year preserved myths, processions reenacted stories of gods, rituals bound the city to its past. In these moments, Babylon became more than a collection of walls and people. It became a living story, a memory carried forward. A silence renewed through song. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine lying in a Babylonian courtyard after a festival. The air still smells of incense. Faint strains of music linger. The stars shine quietly above. Children sleep soundly, their faces lit by lamplight. The city rests, its heart renewed, its silence deepened. In that silence, Babylon endures, not in noise, but in the quiet joy of memory, devotion, and song. Behind Babylon's ziggurats and gates, behind its palaces and canals, lay a quieter foundation, the home. Mud brick walls that glowed in sunlight, courtyards where fires burned, rooms where voices rose in lullabies and prayers. Here lived the women of Babylon, mothers, daughters, wives, sisters, whose lives were often unwritten, their names rarely pressed into clay. Yet they carried the city's true continuity. While kings ruled and priests prayed, It was in the silence of homes that Babylon endured. The houses of Babylon were simple, built of baked or sun-dried brick, plastered with mud, their doors opening onto narrow alleys. Most had a central courtyard, open to the sky where daily life unfolded. Round it were rooms for sleeping, cooking, and storage. In these courtyards, women ground grain on heavy querns, kneaded dough, wove wool, cared for children, and prepared offerings for household gods. The courtyard was not only a place of work but a hearth of warmth, the center of silence and continuity. Imagine standing in such a courtyard at dawn. The sun's first light spills over mud brick walls, catching the smoke of a small fire. A woman grinds grain, her hands steady on the stone, her song soft and rhythmic. A child clings to her side, another chases a chicken across the floor. Pots simmer with lentils and onions, their scent mingling with the dust of morning. In one corner, a small altar holds figurines of protective spirits, to whom she whispers a prayer. The world outside may be vast and restless, but here there is only stillness, a rhythm as steady as breath. Women in Babylon lived within the framework of law. The Code of Hammurabi, etched in stone, defined their rights and responsibilities. A woman could own property, manage dowries, and inherit wealth, though always within the authority of family. Marriage was both a personal bond and a contract, recorded by scribes and sealed with offerings. Divorce was permitted, but laws protected women against abandonment and neglect. Widows often managed estates, their hands carrying the memory of husbands into the silence of continuity. Picture a scribe in the marketplace, unrolling a tablet. A man and woman stand before him, agreeing upon marriage terms. The dowry is listed: silver, wool, perhaps a servant or a field. The scribe presses the signs into clay, recording their bond. Around them, the crowd bustles, but the couple is steady. For them, marriage is not only love but memory, not only union but permanence. The clay tablet dries in the sun, their silence preserved in earth. Motherhood carried its own reverence. Birth was sacred, watched over by goddesses and spirits, attended by midwives skilled in herbs and chants. Infants were bathed in oil, wrapped in cloth, laid in the arms of mothers whose lullabies echoed in courtyards. Songs passed down from generation to generation carried both tenderness and protection, weaving children into the fabric of the city. In their mothers' voices, they heard the first myths, the first prayers, the first silence of belonging. Imagine a summer evening. A mother sits in a courtyard, cradling her child as stars appear above. She hums softly, a tune as old as memory. Her other children sit nearby, weaving mats, grinding grain, or simply listening. The lamp glows faintly, the air is warm. The Euphrates murmurs distantly. The noise of the city is absent here. Only the gentle silence of family remains, a silence that has carried humanity through all ages. Women also worked in crafts and trade. Some were priestesses, tending temples and rituals. Others managed taverns, selling beer brewed in clay jars. Still others spun wool, wove textiles, or sold goods in markets. Their labor was essential, their presence constant, though their names were rarely carved into monuments. Their hands shaped the life of Babylon. Without their silent strength, no king's law or temple hymn would have endured. Families, too, were the fabric of the city. Fathers tilled fields, mothers wove wool, children carried water, grandparents told stories. Meals were shared, prayers spoken together, offerings made at small household altars. Festivals were celebrated not only in temples but in homes, where lamps glowed, songs rose, and bread was broken. In this way, Babylon was not only walls and gardens, but millions of small courtyards filled with memory. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine sitting in one of those courtyards. The air is cool. The stars glitter above, a lamp flickers, casting soft light on clay walls. A mother hums a lullaby. A father tells a story. Children curl against woven mats. Beyond the walls, Babylon's gates and ziggurats rise. But within these walls lies the city's heart. In their silence, families carry Babylon forward, their memory woven into the fabric of time. Every city that rises must guard itself, and Babylon, for all its gardens and temples, was no different. Its strength lay not only in canals and laws but also in walls and soldiers, men who stood watch when others slept, who marched when others planted, who bore the silence of vigilance. The city's defenses were vast, its armies disciplined, its gates watched by steady eyes. Though Babylon's fame is often carried by gardens and myths, it endured for centuries because it was prepared for war, even as it longed for peace. The walls of Babylon were legendary. Ancient writers claim they stretched so wide that chariots could race upon them, so high that enemies trembled at their sight. Built of baked brick, reinforced with bitumen, they encircled the city like an embrace of stone. Towers rose at intervals, their tops serving as watch posts. Gates, heavy with bronze and wood, opened only with care, guarded at all hours. To stand upon those walls was to look out at endless plains, to feel both exposed and protected. To hear the silence of vigilance broken only by the wind. Imagine a soldier on watch at dawn. He leans on his spear, his eyes scanning the horizon. The fields outside the walls are empty, the river glimmers faintly, the sky grows pale with light behind him. The city stirs, bakers light ovens, children stir in courtyards, priests prepare altars, but up here only silence reigns. His duty is to watch, to listen, to hold the line between safety and danger. His steps echo faintly on the bricks, his breath visible in the cool air. He is alone, yet he is also the city's guardian. Babylon's armies were made of farmers and craftsmen, summoned in times of need. When enemies threatened, men took up spears, shields, and bows. Marching under banners of their gods and kings, chariots rattled across plains, horses snorted, bows twanged. Yet for all the noise of battle, there was also silence, the silence of waiting, of standing in formation, of marching steadily mile after mile. Soldiers knew that most of war was not clash but endurance, the quiet weight of armor, the steady tread of feet. Picture a column of soldiers leaving the city. Their sandals raise dust, their shields glimmer in the sun, their spears form a forest of points. The drums beat slowly, marking time. But voices are hushed, families stand at the gates, watching, whispering prayers. The soldiers march on, their faces calm, their steps unbroken. The silence of their march carries weight, not fear, but determination, not noise, but resolve. Babylon's kings understood that walls alone were not enough. They maintained garrisons, trained archers, built siege engines. They fortified canals and moats, turning water into defense as well as life. They knew that silence on the walls was only possible if vigilance never ceased. In inscriptions, they boasted of their strength. Enemies repelled, cities conquered, victories won. Yet beyond the boasts lay the simple truth that soldiers, nameless and countless, bore the burden of protection with steady silence. Inside the city, training took place in courtyards and fields. Young men learned to draw bows, to march in formation, to lift shields together. Archers practiced until their arrows darkened the sky. Spearmen drilled until their thrusts were won. Officers barked orders, but discipline was more than command. It was rhythm, silence, endurance. To be a soldier of Babylon was to become part of a living wall, a shield of flesh and will as much as of brick and stone. Yet for all their preparation, the soldiers of Babylon were also human. They laughed with comrades, shared bread and beer, carved names into their shields. They stood watch at night, listening to the wind whispering stories of home. They carried charms against evil, prayed to gods for strength, kissed families goodbye at gates. Their silence was not emptiness, but filled with longing, devotion, and resilience. Imagine walking the walls at night. Torches flicker, casting shadows. On brick, soldiers move slowly, their sandals soft on the stones. One pauses to gaze at the stars, another hums quietly, Another fingers a small charm hanging from his neck. The city sleeps below. But here above, the watch continues. The silence of Babylon is held by their presence, steady, tireless, fragile yet enduring. Babylon's defenses did not make it immortal. In time, armies would breach its walls. Conquerors would enter its gates. Silence would follow in another form, yet for centuries, these walls stood, these soldiers watched, and the city endured. Their memory lives not in grand inscriptions, but in the silence of vigilance. The quiet strength of men who stood between Babylon and the world. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine leaning against those walls. The bricks are warm beneath your hand, the city glows faintly behind you, the plains stretch endlessly before. A soldier stands nearby, his eyes scanning the distance, his spear steady, his silence strong. You breathe deeply, the air cool, stars above endless. In this moment, you feel the weight of Babylon's protection, a silence not of weakness, but of strength, endurance, and watchfulness. Every city that grows powerful also gathers enemies, and Babylon, for all its gardens and gates, was no exception. Its walls inspired awe, its temples shone with devotion. Its markets thrived with trade, yet beyond those walls other kings looked with envy. Rival cities plotted, and distant empires marched. In Babylon's long story, sieges came often. Some passed quickly, others stretched for months, even years, yet always. Before the clash of weapons and the roar of armies, there was silence, the heavy stillness of waiting. Imagine standing on Babylon's walls at dusk, the horizon thick with dust. In the distance, campfires glow like scattered stars, each one belonging to soldiers of an enemy army. Their tents are pitched in long rows, their banners flutter in the breeze. The sound of hammers rings faintly as they build siege engines. The low murmur of voices carries on the wind, yet within the walls all is quiet. The markets are empty, the gates barred, the streets hushed, families gather in courtyards, whispering prayers, while soldiers keep watch above. The silence is heavy, pressing down on every heart. The enemies of Babylon came from many directions. Assyrians marched with iron weapons, their armies fierce and relentless. Elamites pressed from the east, seeking tribute and power. Later Persians and Macedonians would gaze upon the city with ambition. Each saw Babylon not only as a city but as a prize, a jewel of the plains, a symbol whose capture would echo through the world. To besiege Babylon was not only to conquer land but to break silence, to claim memory. For those within, siege was endurance. The walls stood high, the gates strong, the canals could supply water. But food had to last, and patience was tested. Days stretched into weeks, weeks into months. The people lived in waiting, their lives narrowed to small routines. Bakers stretched flour, families rationed dates, priests prayed longer before the gods. The hum of daily life was replaced by whispers, by the silence of endurance. Picture a mother in her courtyard during a siege. She kneads dough with careful hands, shaping loaves smaller than before. Her children sit quietly, their eyes wide, listening to the faint echoes of enemy drums outside the walls. She whispers reassurances, her voice soft, though her heart is heavy. Above, her husband keeps watch, bow in hand, scanning the horizon. The silence of siege fills their home, not peace, but a fragile calm, broken only by the distant murmur of armies. On the walls, soldiers stood in endless vigilance. They leaned on spears, checked arrows, listened to the faint creak of siege engines being built. At night, they gazed at the glow of enemy fires, at the stars above, at the dark fields stretching endlessly. Their silence was not emptiness, but focus, a readiness that waited without words. Each soldier knew that tomorrow might bring assault, but tonight there was only watchfulness. Siege engines approached slowly, towers of wood battering rams, ladders carried by men. Sometimes they were abandoned after days of resistance, other times they struck hard, shaking gates, splintering walls. Yet Babylon's walls often held. Stones rained down on attackers. Arrows darkened the sky, fire consumed wooden towers. The silence before battle gave way to shouts and roars, but often the silence returned, broken engines smoldering, enemy soldiers retreating, Babylon still standing. Not all sieges ended with victory. There were times when gates fell, when enemies poured in, when silence came in another form, the silence of ruin. Conquerors marched through streets, temples were looted, palaces burned. Yet even then Babylon endured, rebuilt, rose again. Each siege was a wound but not an ending. The city's silence was never fully broken, its memory never erased. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine standing on Babylon's walls during one of these sieges. The sky glows faintly with sunset. The plains stretch vast. The distant fires of an enemy army flicker on the horizon. The city behind you is hushed, its people waiting, its priests praying, its children sleeping uneasily. You lean on your spear, your breath steady, your eyes scanning the darkening land. In this silence before battle, you feel the weight of endurance, the fragility of life, and the strength of waiting. Babylon breathes with you, steady, patient, enduring. Cities are often conquered with the roar of armies, the crash of gates, the hall of fire. But sometimes history turns on a quieter hinge. Babylon, for all its walls and shining gates, its lions and dragons, its canals and gardens, did not end in a single blaze of ruin. When the Persians under Cyrus the Great came, they did not come as a storm of thunder. They came as a change in the current, a turning of water, a conquest carried by patience, river work, and the whisper of inevitability. It was a defeat measured not in shattered bricks, but in open doors and the hush of a city choosing to breathe and keep breathing. The story that has come down to us is told in layered voices, fragments on clay tablets, lines from later chroniclers, inscriptions shaped to honor kings. The outlines overlap. The Persian armies approached. The walls of Babylon stood tall. The Euphrates flowed steady and serene, gliding beneath the city's bridges, feeding canals, cradling boats that once carried barley and dates. Then came the Persian engineers, their eyes turned not toward gates and towers, but toward water. If a river was the city's life, it might also be its passageway and its answer. Imagine the days before the fall. Inside Babylon, life tried to continue. Ovens glowed, looms clicked, temple fires were tended. Yet the air felt different. Rumors mingled with incense, whispers of a king named Cyrus who conquered not only with swords but with promises, who honored gods not his own, who restored shrines, who freed captive peoples and set exiles on their homeward roads. Some in Babylon looked past the walls and wondered if a new order might arrive with gentler hands. Others worried, for change is itself a kind of storm. Still others stood on the walls and did what they had always done, watch the horizon and listen for hoofbeats. Outside the city, a quieter labor unfolded. Persian hands dug channels and cut banks. They guided the Euphrates to wander from its bed. The river that had carried Babylon's life would be persuaded to kneel, its waters lowered, its flow diminished beneath the city's walls. It was not a miracle, only hydrology, skill, and patience. But to those within the walls, it was as if the river itself had decided to whisper to the Persians. On the chosen night, with the water drawn down and the flow slowed, Persian troops slipped along the exposed shallows, under the shadow of bridges and parapets, entering where no gate had opened. Picture that night. The city is drowsing beneath a sky of cool stars. Torches flicker along the walls. The watchmen shift against the bricks. In courtyards, lamps burn low. Children turn and sleep. Priests tend small flames before the gods, whispering hymns that sound like breathing. Beyond the walls, the Euphrates murmurs more softly than usual, as if uncertain. Then footsteps, muffled and damp, touch the riverbed stones. A handful of soldiers becomes a column becomes a stream becomes a river of men who walk where water once ruled. There is no crashing of gates, no battering of doors, only the glide of sandals across wet silt, the hollow echo beneath bridges, the quiet rise of a new morning. Not all stories agree on every detail. Some say the city was taken in a single night. Others suggest that parts of Babylon resisted, that alarms were raised here and there, that corridors briefly rang with the clatter of arms. Yet the enduring note is softness, the absence of the great catastrophe that might have been. The walls did not blaze, the processional way did not fill with bodies, the Ishtar gate did not crumble. Instead, the rhythm of Babylon was gently, decisively altered, as if a great hand had placed a finger on the surface of a bowl of water and sent ripples to the rim. At dawn, the city learned a new name for order. Cyrus did not present himself as Babylon's destroyer, but as its inheritor and guardian. He spoke the language of restoration. Temples would be honored, gods would be respected, and those peoples held captive in Babylon's long shadow would be set free to return home, to rebuild their shrines, to sing again in the streets they remembered. In this, he understood something old. Cities rise from trust as much as from bricks. A conqueror who maintains the sacred rhythms can become a king by breakfast. Imagine a proclamation read in the marketplace, the scribe's voice steady as people gather, eyes wide not with fear, but with a wary relief. Merchants clutch their ledgers, mothers hold children close, elders lean on canes carved long ago. The words drift upward into the blue. The temples will remain, the fields will be tended, the festivals will be honored, the gods of many peoples will be acknowledged. A hush lingers, then a low murmur, like a river resuming its course. The ovens are relit, horns begin to turn, the city exhales. The priests take the measure of the new day. In the quiet of their inner rooms, they consider the signs, the tablets, the old words and the new. They remember the omens read under starlight, the cycles of Venus, the eclipses tracked across years. Now another alignment has occurred, not in heavens, but in human time. A king from the east has entered not as a torch, but as a tide. The statue of a god is straightened, the oil flame is coaxed higher, the hymn is sung again, not to forget the night, but to absorb it into memory, to thread it into the long cloth of Babylon's story. For the soldiers of Babylon who had kept watch, the silence of averted catastrophe must have felt surreal. They had trained their eyes to expect ladders and towers, rams and fires, and instead they found a parley of water and footsteps, the dawn without alarm bells. Some laid down their arms and returned to courtyards where bread was waiting. Others entered new service. Their spears turned from the walls toward distant roads. They would walk in another king's name. The city's defenders became its keepers under a different sky. Not the blue of the glazed bricks, but the pale of a morning, washed clean. And the river, the Euphrates, resumed its deeper channel in the days that followed, called back with a gesture reverse of the one that had summoned its slackened night. Water reclaimed its gossip along the embankments, boats returned. The silver ribbon of life gleamed as before, but to those who looked closely, nothing was quite the same. The river's voice had learned another vow. Its current held the memory of boots upon silt, the stealth of foreign breath beneath old bridges. Babylon would always listen differently to its water. After that, in houses, the mothers told the story in their own way. There was a night, they would say to children in later years, when the city turned without breaking. The children, wide-eyed, imagined the lions on the gate blinking in surprise, the bulls and dragons lowering their embossed heads to watch quiet figures pass beneath. They imagined the ziggurat holding its breath, the lamps in temple halls wavering, and then standing tall. We slept and awoke to a city still standing, the mothers said, and the children listened as to a bedtime prayer. The exiles of many nations, people whose songs had been muted by distance, heard a louder message. In that soft dawn, paths home opened like new canals. Cartwheels shook dust from roads long unused, bundles were tied, old names were spoken again as if they had never been set down. Some turned their faces toward hills and coasts they had not seen since childhood, carrying with them small reliquaries of memory. In their leaving, Babylon discovered the paradox of strength, that a city may be greatest not when it compels people to stay, but when it releases them with dignity, and still remains itself God in the palaces. Officials rearranged tablets, stamped new seals, learned to pronounce Cyrus the way the Persians did. The ledger of the city's days turned to a fresh column, but the numbers still added up to markets, canals, festivals, and law. The throne room's geometry remained the square of authority, the circle of ritual, the line of judgment running from scribe to petitioner and back to scribe. Babylon had become part of a wider tapestry, a province of a greater empire, yes, but also a quieter middle note in a larger chord, one played by a hand that preferred harmony to crash. Was there grief in the fall? Of course. An old sovereignty is like an old wall. Even if a new gate is gentler, stones remember the pressure of the previous arch. Pride must find a new shape. Tradition must fold around a different center. For some, the night of the river brought the ache of things ending. For others, the thrill of things beginning. The city itself, that patient creature of fields and bricks, of contracts and hymns, kept doing what cities do best. It continued. The oven heat did not cool. The grain did not stop growing because a seal had changed its emblem. The silence that followed the fall was, above all, continuity breathing through a different mask. Cyrus allowed local gods their altars and local tongues their prayers. He understood the grammar of cities, that to keep a place alive, you do not tear out its vocabulary, you let it speak with your accent until it becomes a shared language. Babylon's accent endured, a slow, river-rounded syllable that found its way into Persian law and ceremony, into imperial archives and edicts. The city that once taught the world to listen to stars would now teach an empire to listen to the steadier music of administration, of tolerated difference, of quiet strength. After Cyrus entered Babylon, the city did not fall into ruin. Its walls did not collapse, its temples did not empty, its canals did not dry. Instead, it slipped into a new rhythm, becoming part of a larger order, the vast Persian Empire that stretched from Anatolia to the Indus. For Babylon, this was not an erasure but a transformation. The city that had once stood at the center of its own world became one of many jewels in a crown broader than any it had known. Its silence did not deepen into absence, it expanded into continuity, flowing outward through new channels of empire. The Persians understood Babylon's weight. Cyrus and his successors valued the city not only for its wealth but for its prestige, its temples, its aura of ancient wisdom. To hold Babylon was to hold a symbol, a voice of legitimacy that whispered across regions. Thus, the conquerors did not seek to erase Babylon's gods or dismantle its institutions. Instead, they honored them, preserving the rituals that had long bound the city. Marduk's temple still glowed with offerings. Festivals continued, priests maintained their chants. The New Year processions still wound along the processional way, though now with subtle shifts, the king of Persia woven into the rhythm once reserved for Babylonian rulers. Imagine the city in these early years of Persian rule. The streets look much the same: mud brick walls, courtyards, markets filled with dates and wool, scribes hunched over tablets. The Euphrates still flows, canals still shimmer, fields still bend with barley. But there is also something new. Officials arrive from distant lands, their accents foreign, their robes stitched in styles unfamiliar. At palace gates, Persian guards stand beside Babylonian ones, their bows curved differently, their shields painted with new symbols. The city feels at once familiar and changed, like a song whose melody remains, but whose harmony has shifted. Administration under the Persians wove Babylon into a broader web. Taxes were collected not only for local needs but for the empire. Grain, wool, and silver flowed outward. carried along canals and roads to distant capitals. In return, Babylon received goods from across the empire, spices from India, gold from Lydia, horses from the Iranian plateau. Merchants found new horizons for trade. Scribes found themselves writing contracts with names from far-off lands. The city's marketplace buzzed with a new diversity, its silence enriched by unfamiliar voices. Picture a scribe in a marketplace stall, his stylus poised above a tablet. Before him stand two men, one a Babylonian merchant, the other a trader from distant Bactria. They argue softly over weights of silver and bundles of wool. The scribe listens, nods, and records their agreement in cuneiform, pressing each mark carefully. On them, voices rise in a dozen tongues, goods glimmer from a dozen regions. The silence of clay absorbs it all, preserving this small moment of empire in the same script that once carried myths of gods. The archives of Babylon continued to grow. Priests still observed stars, recording omens and cycles. Officials still tallied tribute, noting grain and silver with precision. Contracts still filled shelves, each tablet a fragment of daily life. Yet now, alongside old Babylonian traditions, Persian practices appeared. Aramaic, the lingua franca of the empire, began to appear in documents, written on parchment and papyrus. Babylon's clay endured, but parchment whispered of a wider world, lighter to carry, swifter to spread. The silence of archives now contained two voices, the heavy permanence of clay and the lighter breath of scrolls. Religion too adjusted but did not vanish. The Persians brought with them reverence for Mazda, their high god, yet they did not forbid Babylon's devotion to Marduk, Ishtar, or Shamash. Instead, they allowed shrines to continue, understanding that stability grew from honoring memory. In this, the Persians were pragmatic. To keep Babylon peaceful, one must keep its gods respected. And so the temples continued to burn with oil, to hum with hymns, to hold silence filled with reverence. Life for ordinary people changed less than might be imagined. Farmers still bent over fields. Women still ground grain in courtyards. Children still learned cuneiform on clay shards. Soldiers still stood watch on walls, though their banners bore new emblems. The rhythms of planting and harvest, of marriage and birth, of festivals and funerals continued much as before. Empire was vast, but daily life remained small, intimate, and steady. Babylon endured by folding new threads into its old cloth without tearing it. Imagine walking the processional way under Persian rule. The lions still gleam on blue walls, the Ishtar gate still towers, the ziggurats still casts its shadow, yet in the procession, alongside priests and musicians, walk Persian officials in robes of white, carrying symbols of the new order. The crowd watches, their faces calm. They bow not only to Marduk but also to the king of Persia, whose authority now joins the gods in shaping silence. The harmony is delicate, but it holds. For centuries, Babylon served as an administrative center within the Persian Empire. It was no longer the sole voice of law and power, but it remained a voice heard, a city consulted, a place where memory and authority intersected. Even as new capitals rose, Susa, Persepolis, Ecbatana, Babylon's presence lingered, a reminder that no empire could ignore the weight of history. The Persians ruled the world, but Babylon ruled memory, its silence, woven into the empire's foundation. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine sitting in a Babylonian courtyard during this time. A lamp glows softly, children chase each other across the floor, a woman hums as she weaves. In the corner, a tablet rests beside a parchment scroll, two worlds of writing side by side. Outside, the city hums with familiar sounds, yet above them drifts the echo of new voices from faraway lands. The silence is not broken, it is enriched, stretched, harmonized. Babylon breathes within an empire, and in that breath, it continues. No city lasts forever, no matter how high its gates or how deep its roots in memory. Babylon, which had once been the jewel of Mesopotamia, The city of gardens, gods, and laws did not end with fire in a single night, nor with a sudden collapse of walls. Its decline was quieter, stretched across centuries, a slow fading of voices, a steady crumbling of brick, a silence that deepened not from conquest alone but from neglect. After the Persians, new rulers came. Alexander the Great entered Babylon in 331 BCE, greeted not as a destroyer, but as a liberator. He dreamed of making it his capital, restoring its ziggurats, reviving its glory. Workers cleared rubble, priests sang hymns, scribes prepared plans. Yet Alexander's life ended too soon, and with his death the dream dissolved. Babylon became a place of memory within an empire that turned its gaze westward and eastward, to Alexandria and to Persepolis. The city remained, but its heartbeat slowed. Imagine Babylon in those later centuries. The Euphrates still flows, the walls still stand, the Ishtar gate still gleams with blue and gold. But the markets are quieter, the crowds thinner, some temples are empty, their fires cold, their priests gone. Gardens still bloom in courtyards, but fewer hands tend them. Canals silt up, fields shrink, bricks crack. The city does not vanish overnight, but slowly, like a lamp whose oil runs low, flickering, glowing faintly, then dimming again. Under the Seleucids and Parthians, Babylon survived as a settlement, a provincial town in vast empires. The priests of Marduk still performed rituals, though with fewer voices. Scribes still pressed cuneiform into clay, though fewer tablets were made, and parchment grew more common. The once great archives became quiet, their shelves less filled. Festivals were still celebrated, but the processional way no longer overflowed with people. The silence of Babylon became heavier, filled with echoes of what had been. Picture a priest in a nearly empty temple. The walls still glow faintly with lamplight. The altar still holds bread and incense, but only a handful of worshippers kneel. Outside, children play in alleys, unaware that they walk among ruins once filled with kings and gods. The priest chants softly, his voice steady, carrying words spoken for centuries. He knows that the city has shrunk, but he carries on, for silence must be filled with memory, even when few listen. The bricks of Babylon began to vanish. Villagers carried them away to build houses, canals, and walls in nearby towns. The ziggurat, once a stairway to heaven, crumbled into a mound of rubble. The palaces became quarries of baked brick. Slowly, the city turned into a ruin, its grandeur recycled into other lives, its silence broken only by the cries of birds nesting in abandoned towers. Babylon faded not with a scream, but with a sigh. By the 1st century CE, Babylon was no longer a great city. Travelers described ruins, fallen walls, scattered settlements. The once glorious streets were filled with dust, the processional way broken. Ishtar gate buried beneath layers of earth. The river still flowed, but the city it had cradled was gone. Its silence had shifted from life to memory, from hum to echo. Imagine walking through Babylon in this time. The sun beats down on crumbling walls, grass grows between fallen bricks, owls nest in abandoned chambers, farmers till fields nearby, their plows cutting through soil once trod by kings. Shepherds lead flocks across broken streets, their footsteps echoing faintly against stone. The city is not empty, but it is no longer itself. It has become a place of ghosts, where silence is deeper than sound. Yet even in decline, Babylon endured in memory. Its myths continued to be told, its name whispered in scriptures, its laws studied, its gardens imagined. The silence of its ruins became fertile ground for stories. Some spoke of its arrogance, punished by gods, others of its wisdom, remembered in stars and tablets, still others of its beauty, gone but never forgotten. The city itself may have faded, but its silence became louder in the imagination of those who came after. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine sitting among the ruins of Babylon at twilight. The air is still, the Euphrates glows faintly, the ziggurat is a mound of shadow, the walls rise in fragments, The lions of the gate lie buried, yet the silence is not empty. You feel the weight of centuries, the breath of voices once loud, now quiet. The city is gone, but its memory lingers, steady and eternal. Babylon has faded, but it has not vanished. Its silence endures. When Babylon's bricks began to crumble and its gates stood silent, its life did not end. For some cities, death comes quietly, their names lost in dust, their memory fading with each broken wall. But Babylon was different. It outlived itself, surviving not in stone but in story. Its gardens, its gods, its laws, its pride, these became symbols, read old by strangers who never walked its processional way or leaned against its walls. Babylon became more than a place. It became an idea, echoing across time, shaping imagination long after its silence deepened. In scriptures, Babylon became a name heavy with meaning. For the Hebrews, carried into exile beneath its towers, the city was both prison and paradox. They wept by its rivers, remembering Zion, yet they also absorbed its rhythms, its stories, its silence. Later, Babylon came to symbolize arrogance, decadence, and fall, a city that challenged heaven and was humbled. To speak its name was to summon warning and lament. The Tower of Babel, rising toward the sky, became a tale of confusion, a reminder that pride can scatter languages and silence harmony. In sacred texts, Babylon was less a city than a mirror of human ambition and fragility. Imagine a group of exiles sitting by the river. They hold harps in their hands, but do not play. Their eyes are distant, turned toward a homeland far away. The water flows steadily past, the Euphrates as calm as ever, but their hearts are restless. They sing softly of Zion, their voices trembling. Babylon is around them, with its walls and ziggurats. But in their songs it becomes something else, a place of longing, of loss, of ignorance. In their silence, Babylon is remembered as both sorrow and teacher. For the Greeks and Romans, Babylon became a wonder. Herodotus described its vast walls, its shining gates, its marvel of gardens. Even when ruins lay quiet, travelers spoke of the city as if it were alive, their imaginations filling gaps where bricks had fallen. To them, Babylon was proof of human grandeur, a city that seemed to stretch toward eternity. In their tales, the hanging gardens became more real than ruins, their silence louder than stone. Picture a Greek traveler sketching the Ishtar gate in his scroll. He has never seen lions stride across blue tiles in sunlight, yet he writes as if he has, his imagination filling with golden forms and towering walls. His words carry Babylon into new lands, where others read and dream. Long after the lions crumble, their roar continues, not in sound but in memory. In Christian scripture, Babylon became a symbol of sin, of worldly pride, of all that must fall before the kingdom of heaven. The whore of Babylon, clothed in scarlet, became an image of corruption, standing for empires that exalt themselves against the divine. In this, Babylon ceased to be merely a ruin on the Euphrates and became a timeless archetype. The city as temptation, the city as warning, the city as silence before judgment. And yet, not all memories of Babylon were dark. Scholars in later ages saw in its cuneiform tablets the roots of astronomy, mathematics, and law. They recognized that beneath the myths of pride lay centuries of patience, scribes pressing signs into clay, priests watching stars, farmers tending canals. Babylon was remembered not only as arrogance but as achievement, not only as ruin but as resilience. Its silence was not simply warning but wisdom. Imagine a modern archaeologist brushing dust from a fragment of tablet. The signs emerge slowly, wedge by wedge, their shapes patient and steady. The scholar reads aloud, a record of grain, an omen of stars, a law of Get. The voices of Babylon return, faint but clear, the silence of millennia is broken by understanding. The city's memory restored in whispers. In poetry and song, Babylon has endured as well. Musicians have sung of its rivers, poets have mourned its fall, painters have imagined its gardens. Each work, each line adds to the memory, reshaping the city for new ages. Babylon becomes again what it has always been, not only walls and bricks, but an echo that never fades. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine standing in a library far from Mesopotamia, opening a book that speaks of Babylon. The words are not written on clay but on paper, yet they carry the same silence. You trace them slowly, your mind wandering to lions on blue gates, gardens spilling green against stone, priests gazing at stars. You realize that though the city's bricks are dust, its memory is alive, carried in stories and scriptures, in songs. Babylon lives, not as place, but as silence remembered. For centuries, Babylon lay quiet beneath layers of earth and memory. Shepherds led their flocks across mounds of crumbling brick, villagers dug clay for their homes. Travelers whispered of ruins but saw little more than hills rising gently from the plain. The Euphrates flowed on, steady and eternal. But the city that had once shaped empires and stories lay hidden, its silence deeper than sound, to the world beyond Mesopotamia. Babylon became more myth than place, its gates and gardens, known only through old texts. Yet beneath the soil, it waited, patient, enduring, ready to speak again when careful hands arrived to listen. The rediscovery of Babylon began in the 19th century, when European explorers and archaeologists, stirred by ancient histories and scriptures, turned their eyes to the plains of Iraq. They searched for the mounds that locals called Babi, rising gently above the fields. At first, little could be seen: fragments of brick, traces of walls, broken pottery scattered in dust. But the imagination of explorers filled the silence, urging them to dig, to uncover, to bring forth what lay buried. Imagine the first spade sinking into Babylon's soil. The air is hot. The plain stretches wide. The Euphrates glimmers faintly. In the distance, a team of workers bends to their task, their shovels scraping against dry earth. Slowly, layer by layer, shapes emerge: a wall of mud brick, stamped with the name of Nebuchadnezzar, a fragment of glazed blue tile, its surface gleaming even after centuries. A broken tablet inscribed with cuneiform, the marks still sharp. Each find is a whisper, a piece of silence given voice again. One of the most famous excavations came under Robert Colby, a German archaeologist, who began work in 1899 and spent nearly 2 decades uncovering Babylon. Patient and meticulous, he led teams who cleared mounds, traced walls, and revealed the foundations of palaces, temples, and gates. Under his supervision, the Ishtar gate was unearthed, its fragments carefully lifted and shipped to Berlin, where they were reassembled into the glowing arch we know today. To stand before it in that distant museum is to see Babylon's silence translated into color once more: lions striding, dragons curling, bulls gleaming. Picture the moment when a workman uncovers a section of glazed brick. The dust falls away, revealing a deep cobalt blue shining even in the sun of the plain. The golden lion appears, its mane curling, its jaw open. The archaeologists gather, their faces filled with awe. For centuries, the lion lay hidden. Now it roars silently again, carrying Babylon's memory into the present. The silence of centuries breaks softly, not with noise but with recognition. The excavations also revealed streets, walls, courtyards, and the outlines of temples. The processional way was traced, its path lined with once brilliant bricks. Palaces of Nebuchadnezzar were uncovered, their foundations stretching wide, their inscriptions boasting of power. The great ziggurat, long crumbled, was identified in its mound of ruins, its shadow lingering even in absence. Each discovery stitched together fragments of the city's life, weaving silence into story once more. Yet the silence of Babylon was not wholly broken. For every wall uncovered, many more lay buried. For every tablet read, countless others remained shattered or lost. The excavators preserved what they could, but time had done its work. What we see today is not the city as it was, but echoes, outlines, whispers of grandeur. Babylon lives again in ruins, its silence tempered but not erased. Imagine walking through the excavation site at dusk in the early 20th century. The mounds stretch wide, trenches cut deep, workers rest from their day's labor. Bricks lie scattered, some stamped with ancient kings' names, others plain and weathered. A fragment of pottery glints in the fading light, a tablet lies wrapped. For study, a lion stares upward from newly uncovered tiles. The air is still, the silence deep, yet filled now with voices, the voices of archaeologists, of history returning, of Babylon speaking once more. The rediscovery of Babylon was not only physical but cultural. It revived interest in Mesopotamian history, in the roots of writing, law, and astronomy. Scholars studied tablets, museums displayed lions and dragons, poets and artists imagined the gardens anew. Babylon's silence, once confined to ruins, now spread into books, paintings, and classrooms across the world. It became again what it had been in ancient times, a name that stirred awe, a memory that endured. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine yourself standing among those ruins under the stars. The air is cool, the Euphrates murmurs softly nearby, and the outlines of walls glow faintly in moonlight. Around you, fragments of lions and bricks lie scattered, each a whisper of a world long gone. You lean down, touch a fragment, and feel the weight of silence and memory combined. Babylon lives not in noise, but in the quiet persistence of its ruins, uncovered slowly, carried gently into the present. When the ruins of Babylon began to rise from the dust, they did so quietly. Walls and gates appeared, outlines of palaces stretched across the plain. Fragments of lions and dragons gleamed once more. But the true voice of Babylon did not lie in bricks or stones. It lay in clay, in the countless tablets buried beneath soil, scattered in broken heaps, stored in forgotten chambers. These tablets, covered in tiny wedge-shaped signs, seemed mute at first. To eyes untrained, they were only scratches on earth, but within them slept centuries of memory waiting for scholars to give them voice again. The script of Babylon, cuneiform, was among the oldest known, pressed with a reed stylus into soft clay. Then baked or dried, it carried contracts, hymns, myths, laws, and records. For millennia it had been forgotten, its signs unreadable, its silence complete. Shepherds and farmers found tablets in fields, curious but meaningless. Only in the 19th century did scholars begin to unlock its code, piecing together the wedge marks as if solving a riddle of time. Step by step, the silence of Babylon was broken. Imagine a scholar in a quiet study, oil lamp glowing, a tablet resting in his hands. He leans close, tracing the lines with his finger, comparing them to lists of signs copied from other finds. He mutters softly, testing pronunciations, searching for meaning. The clay is rough, chipped, yet the marks are precise, steady. Slowly patterns emerge, the number, a name, a phrase. The scholar feels the weight of millennia give way as silence turns into voice. The breakthrough came when scholars compared Babylonian signs with inscriptions in other languages. The Behistun inscription in Persia, carved into a cliff, held the same text in three scripts: Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian cuneiform. By studying these together, linguists could match signs to sounds, sounds to words, words to meaning. Piece by piece, the tablets of Babylon began to speak. Contracts revealed debts and trades, omens revealed the watching of stars, myths revealed the battles of gods. The city that had slept in silence for 2,000 years began to whisper again. Picture the moment when the Epic of Gilgamesh was read for the first time in centuries. A scholar unrolls the tablet, his eyes widening as he recognizes a story of kings and friendship, of grief and mortality. He reads aloud, his voice trembling, as Gilgamesh mourns Enkidu, as he seeks immortality, as he learns the silence of death. In that room the ancient words live again, bridging millennia. The silence of clay is broken by human breath, and Babylon speaks once more. Thousands of tablets have since been read. Some are grand, laws of Hammurabi, myths of creation, epics of kings. Others are small, lists of sheep, records of debts, receipts for barley. Together they form a chorus of voices, from kings to farmers, priests to children. Babylon's silence becomes rich, filled with the hum of daily life, the rhythm of stars, the weight of law. Imagine walking into a museum today. Behind glass lie rows of tablets, each small, brown, and remarkable at first glance. You lean closer and see the wedge-shaped signs, neat and deliberate. A label explains, "Hymn to Ishtar, astronomical observations. Debt record, 523 BCE. You realize that each tablet is a voice, preserved in silence, waiting for eyes to read and ears to listen. The room grows quiet, filled with the breath of memory. The scholars who deciphered cuneiform became, in a sense, modern scribes. They pressed their own marks into books and papers, recording translations, preserving the old words in new scripts. Their work carried Babylon into classrooms, libraries, and minds across the world. They broke silence not with destruction but with understanding, turning fragments of clay into stories that live again. Yet the silence of Babylon is never fully gone. Many tablets remain unread, some broken, some lost. Even those translated still hold mysteries, shades of meaning lost in time. To read Babylon is to listen to echoes, to piece together a voice from fragments. Its silence remains, but it is a silence filled with presence, like the pause between lines of poetry, like the stillness between breaths. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine holding a Babylonian tablet in your hands. The clay is cool, the signs sharp. You trace them with your finger, feeling the work of a scribe long gone. On you, the world is quiet. Then softly, almost imperceptibly, the signs begin to speak, not loudly but steadily, carrying voices across millennia. You hear the hum of markets, the chants of priests, the whispers of laws, the songs of myths. The silence of Babylon is broken, yet preserved, eternal in clay. Though Babylon's kings are gone and its walls have long since cracked beneath sun and rain, the city has never truly disappeared. Its ruins still lie on the plains of Iraq. Its name still spoken in prayers, in songs, in classrooms, and in conversations across the world. The silence of Babylon, once deep and buried, now hums softly in the present, in the footsteps of archaeologists, in the curiosity of travelers, in the imaginations of millions who have never walked its earth. In the 20th and 21st centuries, Babylon became more than an ancient site. It became a symbol layered with meanings. Archaeologists returned to its ruins, uncovering streets, walls, and foundations. Museums displayed its lions and dragons reassembled in distant halls. Scholars traced its tablets, finding in them the roots of astronomy, law, and myth. Yet beyond scholarship, the city remained in public memory, a name heavy with echoes, evoking both grandeur and warning. Imagine walking through the ruins today. The sun is hot, the air filled with the hum of insects. Before you stretch low walls of baked brick, foundations of palaces, outlines of streets. The Ishtar gate does not rise here in its glory. Much of it rests in Berlin, but its base still whispers of brilliance. You walk across dust that once rang with sandals, across earth that once echoed with chants. The silence is immense, yet not empty. It carries the breath of thousands of years, the weight of memory, the hum of curiosity. In modern culture, Babylon has become many things. Musicians have sung of it as a city of temptation and fall. Writers have used it as metaphor for exile, for corruption, for beauty lost. In reggae and gospel, in poetry and novels, Babylon often stands for worldly power, oppressive but fragile, a system destined to crumble. Each use reshapes the silence, but all keep the name alive, passing it from age to age. For archaeologists, Babylon is a site of patient study. Each season of excavation brings new fragments, tablets still inscribed with contracts and hymns, walls revealing traces of painted brick, Objects once carried in courtyards, scholars catalog, translate, and preserve their work slow and deliberate. To them, Babylon is not only myth but reality, a place where silence yields to spades and brushes, where memory is coaxed back into daylight. Picture a team at dawn, kneeling in trenches. Their brushes move gently across a surface of old brick, revealing a wedge-shaped inscription. The sun rises behind them, casting golden light on ruins. On them, the plain stretches wide. The river glimmers faintly in the distance. The silence is deep, broken only by soft voices of scholars, the sound of tools, the beating of wings overhead. In this moment, Babylon speaks again, not in roar, but in whisper. The ruins have also become part of modern identity. For people of Iraq, Babylon is a reminder of ancient heritage, a root beneath centuries of change. It is both pride and paradox, a symbol of greatness, yet also of fragility. To walk its ruins is to feel both the burden and the wonder of history. In times of difficulty, its name is invoked as a reminder of endurance, of memory that outlasts even the harshest storms. Tourists, when they come, experience a different silence. They walk among the ruins with cameras and maps, but also with awe. They stand where Nebuchadnezzar once ruled, where Hammurabi once judged, where priests once watched stars. The silence humbles them, reminding them that greatness can fade, but memory persists. Each visitor adds a layer to Babylon's present, their footsteps becoming part of the long line of those who have walked there. The city also lingers in dreams. In films and novels, the hanging gardens still bloom, the ziggurat still rises, the Ishtar gate still gleams. Babylon is reimagined in digital landscapes, its silence turned to spectacle, its ruins filled with color once more. Though fictional, these visions keep the city alive, reminding us that silence can be filled with imagination, that ruins can bloom again in story. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine yourself standing at the edge of Babylon's ruins in the present day. The horizon glows with evening light, the Euphrates murmurs faintly, the plains stretch wide. Before you lie bricks worn with centuries, fragments of lions, shadows of walls. You breathe deeply, and in that breath you feel the weight of time. Babylon is gone, yet here, silent, yet alive. A ruin, yet eternal. Its silence belongs not only to the past, but also to now. When bricks crumble and gardens fade, a city may yet find a second life in the imagination. Babylon, long after its walls had fallen quiet and its courtyards grown over with grass, lived again in poetry, painting, music, and story. For centuries, travelers, artists, and dreamers spoke of it not as ruin but as vision, a place of wonder, temptation, beauty, and loss. In their words and images, Babylon rose once more, shimmering not in clay but in thought. Its silence became fertile ground, from which countless voices grew. In medieval Europe, Babylon was known mostly through scripture. It became a symbol of pride and fall, a city whose arrogance met divine judgment. Artists painted it as a tower rising impossibly high, reaching the clouds, only to shatter in confusion. The Tower of Babel, though never truly Babylon, merged with its memory, becoming the city's most enduring symbol in Christian imagination. For painters, the tower was both marvel and warning, a spiral of ambition climbing skyward, fragile in its silence, destined to collapse. Imagine standing in a cathedral, gazing at a stained glass window, light pours through blues and reds, shaping the image of a tower winding upward, its top lost in clouds. At the base, figures scatter, their tongues confused, their voices tangled. The silence of unity has been broken, replaced with the noise of misunderstanding. To the medieval viewer, this was Babylon, not the city of gardens and gates, but the city of pride humbled. Its silence lived as allegory, as lesson. Later, in the Renaissance and beyond, explorers and scholars turned their attention back to Mesopotamia. Travelers wrote of mounds near the Euphrates, claiming them as the ruins of Babylon. Painters illustrated the city as a wonder of ancient times, with hanging terraces, golden lions, and vast walls stretching across plains. The hanging gardens became a favorite subject, a cascade of greenery rising above desert, watered by hidden channels. In their imaginations, Babylon was less a ruin than a paradise lost, a vision of human genius entwined with fragility. Picture an artist at his easel in the 18th century. Before him is a canvas where he paints tier upon tier of gardens, each filled with palms, roses, and vines. Water flows from hidden aqueducts, cascading down into pools beyond the blue of the Ishtar. Gate glimmers, lions striding across its surface. The painter has never seen Babylon, but his brush makes it real, the dream of beauty born from silence. Poets, too, kept Babylon alive. William Blake, in his visions, spoke of it as a place of grandeur and fall. Lord Byron wrote of its ruins, a voice of the dead, carrying echoes of vanished kings. In romantic poetry, Babylon was at once majestic and melancholy, a city that symbolized both the height of human creation and the inevitability of decay. Its silence was not empty but filled with the sigh of vanished glory, a reminder that even the greatest must fade. In modern times, Babylon appears everywhere, in novels, in films, in songs. Sometimes it is imagined as a city of decadence, glowing with temptation, echoing with warnings of downfall. Sometimes it is painted as a wonder, a lost paradise of gardens and stars. Sometimes it becomes a metaphor for exile, for longing, for the fragility of human pride. Each vision adds another layer to its silence, another echo to its memory. Imagine a reader in a quiet room, opening a novel that speaks of Babylon. The pages describe golden lions, flowing gardens, priests gazing at stars. The reader closes their eyes, and the city rises in the mind, alive with color and sound. Though the bricks are long dust, Babylon breathes again, not in ruins, but in imagination. The name itself carries power. To say Babylon is to summon centuries of association, pride, beauty, fall, exile, wonder, warning. No other city carries such a layered silence, at once sacred and profane, glorious and ruined, remembered and forgotten. It is a word, heavy with echoes, a memory that will not fade. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine Babylon not as it was, nor as it is, but as it lives in imagination. A city of gardens glowing under starlight, a tower spiraling into clouds, a gate of blue bricks, lions striding in golden rows, a ruin silent under grass, a poem, a painting, a dream in your mind. All these layers come together, and Babylon breathes once more, eternal, silent, and alive. Long before Babylon became a name that echoed through scriptures and empires, it was little more than a cluster of huts along the Euphrates. The river, broad and slow, carried silt from the mountains and spread it across flat plains, creating soil rich enough for barley and wheat. It was here, in this fertile bend, that people began to settle. They pressed reeds into the mud, stacked clay bricks, and built the beginnings of a city that would one day be remembered as the navel of the world. Imagine their earliest mornings there. The river mist clings to the air, fishermen pull nets woven of palm fibers, and women grind grain with heavy stones, their hands steady in rhythm. Children chase goats along the muddy banks, their laughter blending with the cries of birds wheeling overhead. These were simple sounds, not the thundering noise of empire, but the quiet heartbeat of beginnings. Babylon did not rise in a moment. It grew like a reed pushing steadily upward from wet soil. The first builders of Babylon lived in a land already filled with voices. To the south lay summer, where writing had already taken root on clay tablets. To the north stretched Akkad, whose kings had carved their power in conquest. Babylon was born in their shadow, a settlement of mud brick and hope, its people borrowing tools, gods, and traditions from those who came before. The first temples rose not as vast ziggurats, but as modest shrines where incense curled forward. The sky and clay figurines of gods stood in silence. Picture a priest in one of these shrines. He wears a robe of woven flax, his hair tied neatly, his feet bare upon cool clay. He kneels before a small altar, where a lamp flickers with oil. Beside him are jars of grain and jugs of beer, offerings to the unseen powers that watch over river and field. He chants softly, his words blending with the sound of water lapping at the banks. Outside, farmers tend barley, bending low in the fields, their bodies glistening in the sun. The gods, they believe, must be honored, for the river gives life, but may also bring floods. In these early centuries, Babylon was not yet Babylon. It was a village among villages, its walls low, its people many-tongued, its identity still forming. Yet even then, something lingered in its air, a sense that here, on this bend of the Euphrates, people were gathering more than crops. They were gathering memory. Clay tablets began to appear marked with wedge-shaped impressions, recording debts, trade offerings. A shepherd delivers wool, a potter delivers vessels. A farmer owes barley, all impressed into clay that hardens. In the sun, the first library of Babylon was not a grand hall, but small tablets tucked into baskets, voices hardened into earth. And slowly, brick by brick, wall by wall, the settlement grew. Merchants brought lapis from Afghanistan, timber from the Levant, copper from the mountains. Caravans came trudging across dusty plains, their donkeys laden with goods, their drivers chanting to keep pace. In the market squares, men haggled over prices. Women sold bread baked in clay ovens. Scribes stood ready with their tablets to mark each transaction. The hum of trade became the music of early Babylon, soft but steady, weaving the first strands of the city's future greatness. But more than trade and temples, it was the river that shaped these beginnings. The Euphrates was both lifeline and threat, a steady source of water but also a force that could drown fields with sudden floods. To live by it was to live in balance, digging canals, raising levees, watching the sky for signs of rain. In this, the people of early Babylon were not alone. Across Mesopotamia, cities rose and fell with the river's moods. Yet here, by chance or destiny, a settlement endured. Its walls were rebuilt, its fields replanted, its shrines rededicated. Through centuries of silence and toil, Babylon prepared itself to one day be remembered. Imagine, now standing on a rise above this first Babylon. The fields stretch in neat rows, canals glimmer in sunlight, smoke curls from clay ovens, and the sound of hammers on mud brick echoes faintly. The settlement is small, humble, almost fragile. Yet already there is a sense of permanence. Each brick pressed with fingers, each tablet marked with signs, each offering placed before a god is a step toward the city that will one day awe the world. And in this silence, the first whispers of law and order already stir. Neighbors argue over boundary stones. Debts are marked and remembered, agreements sealed with clay. These are not yet the great laws of Hammurabi, but their shadow is present, forming slowly in the ordinary rhythms of life. For every civilization begins not with kings and wars, but with bread shared, debts recorded, and prayers whispered. Babylon was no different. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine lying beside the Euphrates in its earliest days. The stars spread across the sky, the river murmurs softly, and in the distance, the faint glow of lamps flickers from mud brick houses. The air smells of earth and barley, of fire and reeds. Babylon is small, but alive, a quiet heartbeat in the silence of Mesopotamia. You feel its presence, fragile yet determined, and you know here, in this soil, something vast has begun. The village by the Euphrates, once little more than scattered huts and shrines, began slowly to change. What was once a place of fishermen and farmers, scribes and small markets, grew into something more enduring. With each passing generation, Babylon shed a little of its fragility and wrapped itself in walls of clay. It was not yet the city of gardens or laws, not yet the capital of empires, but it was becoming more than a settlement. It was learning to endure, to define itself against time. The first walls were modest, made of sun-dried mud brick. They rose not much higher than a man, circling the central shrine and the homes of its people. These walls were not invulnerable, but they gave form to the idea of permanence. Within them, the community gathered, traded, prayed, and planned. Outside, the fields stretched toward the horizon, watered by canals dug with patient hands, while herds grazed under the watch of shepherds. Imagine standing by these early walls at sunset. The bricks are warm from the day's heat, the shadows long across the plain. A gate of wood stands open and villagers stream through, bringing their goods back from the fields. The air smells of barley and smoke, of sweat and clay. The river murmurs softly nearby, a constant presence, its water flowing past as it has for centuries. Inside the walls, lamps are lit, glowing against the mud brick. While children chase each other across courtyards, life is simple, but it is steady. Temples began to grow within the city. The first shrines, small and plain, gave way to larger structures of brick and stone. Their walls were painted with simple colors, their altars adorned with offerings of bread, beer, and incense. Priests in robes of linen tended to the fires, chanting hymns to the gods of the river, the sky, and the earth. Among them rose Marduk, a deity who would one day become Babylon's great patron, but who in these early days was one among many voices in the pantheon. Picture a temple courtyard filled with worshippers. Men and women kneel with baskets of grain, children clutch small, clay figurines of protective spirits, and priests move among them with bowls of incense. The smoke rises into the air, curling against the walls, carrying prayers upward. A singer begins a hymn, her voice steady, rising over the murmur of the crowd. For a moment, the city is united not in trade or labor, but in silence before the divine. These temples became the heart of Babylon, as important as its markets or walls, shaping its identity as a place where earth and heaven met. With walls and temples came the stirrings of governance. Elders gathered in courtyards to settle disputes, scribes recorded decisions upon clay, and rules began to shape daily life. A man owes barley to his neighbor, another disputes a boundary stone. A woman claims her dowry from her family. Each case is recorded, the marks impressed into wet clay with steady hands. Though still fragile, these were the earliest seeds of law, the beginnings of order that would one day blossom into codes carved in stone. The city grew as caravans came more frequently. Traders from Sumer, Akkad, and beyond stopped at Babylon's gates, bringing copper, timber, and lapis. In return, Babylon offered grain, wool, and crafted goods. The market square swelled with voices, haggling laughter, chants of merchants. A scribe sat nearby, his tablet ready, recording weights and debts, his stylus tapping rhythmically against clay. Around him, life flowed in cycles, planting, harvest, worship, trade. Each cycle left its imprint on the city's growing soul. Imagine walking through Babylon's market at midday. Stalls of reed and cloth lined the square, filled with baskets of dates, pots of oil, and jars of honey. A merchant displays beads of lapis that shimmer blue in the sun. Children tug at their mother's sleeves, asking for sweet cakes baked in clay ovens. Priests pass through, their robes brushing against the crowd, reminding all of the gods who watched over them. The air hums with life, and above it all, the unfinished walls of Babylon stretch outward, as if already dreaming of the greatness to come. But Babylon was not free from danger. Rival cities eyed its growth, and raiders sometimes tested its walls. Floods from the Euphrates could undo months of labor sweeping through fields and houses alike. Yet each time, the people rebuilt, the walls were patched, the canals dredged, the shrines restored. Fragile though it was, Babylon endured. learning with each hardship to shape itself against the world. As centuries passed, the walls grew taller, the temples grander, the markets busier. Babylon was no longer a nameless settlement among many. It was a city with identity, with voice, with presence. The first bricks had been laid not only in mud and clay but in memory. And though the world beyond its walls was vast and turbulent, within them the city began to whisper of permanence, of a destiny not yet visible but already stirring. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine sitting within those early walls. The lamps glow softly, casting golden light against mud brick. The sound of voices fades as families settle into sleep. The Euphrates murmurs beyond, steady and eternal. You lean against the wall, feel its warmth, and know that you are part of something growing, something enduring. Babylon is still young, but already it dreams of gardens and laws, of glory and silence. Its whispers drift into the night, fragile yet unyielding. When a city begins to rise, it does so not only in walls and markets, but in the places where earth touches heaven. In Babylon, that connection was built brick by brick, lifted upward in temples and ziggurats that sought to mirror the sky. These were not the sprawling hanging gardens of legend, nor the towering monuments of later kings, but the first beginnings, the slow reaching of human hands upward, guided by faith, ritual, and the longing to be close to the divine. The earliest shrines of Babylon had been small, little more than mud brick rooms with altars of clay. A lamp flickered, a priest murmured hymns, offerings of bread and beer were placed in simple vessels. But as the city grew, so too did its ambition. Temples were expanded, walls thickened, columns added. Within their courtyards, incense rose steadily into the air, mingling with the dust and the scent of river reeds. The gods were no longer content to dwell in huts. They required houses of permanence, places where the city itself could meet the heavens. Imagine the first construction of a larger temple. Workers haul bricks of clay, each marked with wedges pressed by royal decree. They lift them in lines, stacking wall upon wall. Priests oversee the work, sprinkling water, chanting prayers, ensuring that each stone is placed with care. The sun beats down, the air is thick with dust, but the workers press on. Slowly, the temple rises, its roof climbing higher than the homes that surround it, its walls thick and strong, its presence commanding. For the people of Babylon, such temples were not merely buildings, but living beings, bodies of God shaped into brick. From these temples grew the idea of the ziggurat, the step tower that would become Babylon's signature. Modeled on mountains, ziggurats rose in tiers, each level smaller than the one below, their stairways climbing steadily upward. At their summit stood a shrine where heaven and earth touched. To climb a ziggurat was not only to ascend physically, but spiritually, drawing nearer to the gods with each step. Picture one of the first small ziggurats of Babylon. Its base is broad, built of sun-dried brick. A staircase climbs its side, leading to a small shrine at the top. Priests ascend at dawn, carrying incense and bowls of offerings. From the summit, the view stretches across the plain, canals gleaming like silver threads, fields swaying with barley, the Euphrates winding steadily toward the horizon. The city lies below, quiet and orderly, while above the gods are thought to dwell in the open sky. In this moment, the ziggurat becomes a bridge uniting the dust of earth with the silence of the heavens. These sacred structures were more than symbols. They were centers of life, guiding the rhythm of the city. Within their courtyards, festivals unfolded, processions of priests, musicians playing lyres and drums, dancers moving in circles. At night, torches lined their stairways, glowing like stars brought down to earth. For ordinary people, the temples were places of gathering and memory, where births were blessed, marriages sealed, disputes settled, and prayers offered. The sacred was not distant in Babylon. It was woven into the very bricks of the city. Imagine a festival evening. The ziggurat glows with torchlight, its tiers shining against the dark sky. Crowds gather in the square below, their voices hushed, In reverence, priests climbed the stairs carrying statues of gods, their robes gleaming white. Music swells, the steady beat of drums, the soft hum of lyres, incense curls upward, mingling with the smoke of torches, rising to the stars. The people lift their eyes, watching, believing that heaven is near, that the gods hear them in this moment of silence and song. But the ziggurats and temples were also fragile, built of mud brick. They required constant repair, for rain and time wore them down. Workers patched their walls, replaced fallen bricks, reinforced foundations. Each generation inherited not only the temples, but the responsibility to preserve them. And in this way, Babylon's sacred skyline was never finished, but always in the process of becoming. Always rising toward the sky, always reaching for silence and permanence. The temples also housed libraries of clay tablets. With inside rooms, scribes stored records of offerings, hymns, and myth. The Enuma Elish, Babylon's creation story, may have first been whispered in such chambers, its lines pressed into clay, its verses recited in candlelight, in the shadows of brick walls. The city's first great myths took shape, preserved in silence for generations to come. The gods lived in the ziggurats, but their voices were kept in tablets, fragile, earthy, enduring. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine walking slowly up the steps of a Babylonian ziggurat at dawn. The air is cool, the sky pale with first light, the city still asleep below. Each step you take feels heavy yet steady, carrying you higher. At the top, a small shrine glows with a single lamp. The wind whispers across the plains, the Euphrates gleams faintly in the distance, and in the silence, you feel the presence of gods. The city stretches beneath you, small yet alive. Dreaming of greatness, Babylon is no longer a village, is a place that rises, that remembers, that reaches upward. Long before Babylon was known for its laws or its gardens, it was known for its stories. In the courtyards of temples, in the quiet chambers where scribes worked by lamplight, in the market squares where singers performed for bread. Myths and epics shaped the breath of the city. They were not merely entertainment, they were memory, identity, the threads that bound Babylon to heaven and earth. When the first styluses pressed symbols into clay, many of the words they carried were prayers, hymns, and stories, whispers of the gods given form. One of the most enduring was the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic. It told of a time before time, when only water existed, Apsu, the sweet water, and Tiamat, the salt sea. From their mingling came gods younger and restless. Conflict grew between generations, and in the clash Tiamat rose in fury, a great sea dragon threatening to devour all. Against her came Marduk, champion of the younger gods. With net and bow he fought her, split her body in two, and from her remains created the heavens and the earth, from order born of chaos. The world began, and Babylon claimed its place as the center of creation. Imagine a priest reciting this story in a temple courtyard at dusk. The air is heavy with the scent of incense. The sky glows red with fading sun. And the people sit in silence. His voice rises steadily, recounting Marduk's battle, his victory, his shaping of the cosmos. Children lean against their parents, their eyes wide with wonder. Farmers and traders listen with equal reverence, for in this story, they hear not only the origins of the world but the authority of their city's god. Babylon, through Marduk, was not only a city but the axis of creation itself. Other myths filled Babylon's memory. The story of Gilgamesh, though older than Babylon itself, lived on in its libraries. This epic of a king who sought immortality, who wrestled with grief and wandered to the ends of the earth, resonated deeply. On clay tablets, his journey was inscribed, his friendship with Enkidu, his battle with the bull of heaven, his sorrow at death, his futile quest for eternal life. In Gilgamesh's lament, Babylonians heard the eternal truth, that even kings must bow to silence, that mortality is the fate of all. Picture a scribe unrolling a tablet of Gilgamesh by the flicker of an oil lamp. The clay is heavy in his hands, the cuneiform signs small and dense. He traces them with his stylus, reading aloud to a small group of listeners, fellow scribes, perhaps a curious child, perhaps a priest who will carry the tale into ritual. The listeners lean close, the lamplight catching their faces. Outside, the city hums softly with life, but within, only the voice of Gilgamesh matters. His lament becomes their own, his questions echo into their silence. There were hymns too, sung in temples with lyres and drums, songs to Ishtar, goddess of love and war, to Shamash, god of the sun and justice, to Nabu, god of writing and wisdom. Each hymn was a thread in the fabric of Babylon's identity. Priests sang them in ritual, children heard them in festivals, scribes recorded them in tablets. Music filled the courtyards, rising like incense, carrying prayers to the gods. Sing was to remember, to preserve, to keep silence at bay. Myths also shaped daily life. Omens inscribed on tablets told how the gods spoke through stars, through the flight of birds, through the patterns of sheep livers examined by priests. Each sign was part of a story, a dialogue between heaven and earth. To the Babylonians, the cosmos was not silent, it was full of meaning, whispering constantly through signs, waiting to be read. Yet myths, like temples and laws, were fragile. Many tablets crumbled, their words lost, fires consumed libraries, conquerors scattered collections, time wore away clay. What we know today is but a fragment of what once filled Babylon. Whole songs, entire verses, long hymns are missing, silent now, but even in fragments, the voices endure. To read a single line of the Enuma Elish or a broken tablet of Gilgamesh is to feel Babylon's breath, still faint, still alive. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine sitting in a Babylonian courtyard under a sky full of stars. A singer begins to chant the story of creation, his voice steady, his hands striking a simple lyre. The stars above glitter like the eyes of gods, the river flows steadily nearby, and the people listen in silence. The story unfolds: chaos, battle, creation, order. When the song ends, the silence that follows is deep, filled with awe. Babylon sleeps that night not as a city of bricks and fields, but as the center of a story, held together by myths whispered into clay. When Babylon grew strong under its kings, it sought not only to build walls and temples, but to shape the rhythm of life itself. Markets bustled, shrines glowed, fields swayed in the wind. But beneath it all there had to be order. Disputes over land, debts, and families could not remain as quarrels whispered in courtyards. They needed words of permanence, rules that stood above any single voice. Out of this need came one of the most remarkable achievements of Babylon, the Code of Hammurabi, laws etched not upon fragile clay but carved into stone, enduring through centuries. Hammurabi, who reigned in the 18th century BCE, was not the first ruler to issue decrees. Kings before him had judged disputes, declared taxes, set standards for trade. But Hammurabi gathered these practices into a unified vision, a code meant not for one day but for all time. He ordered his scribes to carve nearly 300 laws onto a tall black stele of basalt, the words rising in neat columns topped by an image of Hammurabi standing before Shamash, the sun god of justice. It was not only a law code but a declaration that justice itself was sanctified, bound by divine authority, meant to govern in silence long after the king was gone. Imagine standing before that stele in the heart of Babylon. It towers above you, smooth and dark, its surface glinting faintly in the sunlight. At the top, the carved image shows Hammurabi receiving a staff and ring from Shamash, symbols of law and power. Below, the lines of cuneiform march steadily downward, each one pressed deep into the basalt by skilled hands. Round you, people gather, merchants, farmers, priests, children. Some cannot read, but they understand the presence of the stone. It is more than words, It is authority, permanence, silence that speaks. The laws themselves touched every corner of life. They set wages for laborers, prices for goods, standards for trade. They defined punishments for theft, for injury, for false witness. They addressed marriage, inheritance, property, and contracts. The famous principle of an eye for an eye appears here, not as cruelty but as a balance, a way to measure justice in equal weight. Each law reflects the rhythms of daily life. A farmer whose canal floods his neighbor's field must compensate him. A builder whose house collapses is responsible for the loss. Through these laws, Babylon sought to bind the chaos of life into order. Picture a scribe reading the laws aloud in a marketplace. He unrolls a clay tablet copy, his voice clear above the murmur of trade. Merchants pause in their bargaining. Farmers set down their baskets. Children gather near. He recites a law: if a man steals from the temple, he shall be put to death. Another: if a man hires an ox and it is injured, he shall compensate the owner. Each phrase is precise, direct, carrying the weight of authority. The crowd listens, nods, murmurs. The laws are not abstract. They are the very fabric of their lives. The code of Hammurabi was more than justice. It was memory. By carving the laws into stone, Hammurabi ensured that his vision would endure beyond his reign. Unlike clay tablets that could crumble or be lost, the basalt stele stood immovable. To stand before it was to feel the weight of permanence, the silence of words that could not be erased. It was a library of law contained in a single stone, a voice frozen in silence, meant to echo across time. And yet, like all things, even the stele was vulnerable. Centuries later, conquerors carried it away, and it eventually lay buried, forgotten, until rediscovered in modern times. Today it rests far from Babylon in a museum, its words still visible, its presence still commanding. Though removed from its home, it continues to whisper, carrying the silence of Babylon's justice into new ages. The Code of Hammurabi reminds us that laws are not only rules but memory. They preserve the shape of daily life, the concerns of farmers, builders, merchants, families. They show us what mattered to Babylon: fairness, order, stability, reverence for the gods. They also remind us that even silence can carry authority. The basalt stele stood not as a voice shouted but as a presence endured, a silence that spoke of justice eternal. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine standing once more before the stele in Babylon's square. The sun sets, casting long shadows. The stone glows faintly in the fading light. The words carved into it are silent, yet you feel their presence, a weight of order, of permanence, of memory. Around you, the city hums softly, but within this moment, there is stillness. The laws endure, and through them, Babylon whispers across time. Among the 7 wonders of the ancient world, one stands apart in mystery: the hanging gardens of Babylon. Unlike the pyramids of Egypt or the statues of Greece, their stones have not been found. Their remains are uncertain, and their very existence is debated. Yet their memory has endured for more than 2,000 years, whispered through ancient writers, painted in the imagination, dreamed as a place where stone and water, earth and sky wove together in silence. The gardens were said to have been built by a Babylonian king, perhaps Nebuchadnezzar II, who reigned in the 6th century BCE. According to legend, they were created for his queen Amadis of Media, who longed for the green hills of her homeland. To ease her sorrow, Nebuchadnezzar ordered terraces of stone to be built, planted with trees, flowers, and vines, watered by hidden channels that drew from the Euphrates, rising tier upon tier. The gardens were said to appear as if they floated in the air, a mountain of greenery in the heart of the city. Imagine approaching Babylon from the plain, the sun high, the walls towering. Beyond the ziggurats and palaces, you see a cascade of green trees swaying above terraces of stone. Palms rise against the sky, vines spill downward, flowers bloom in colors that dazzle the eye. Amid the dust of the desert and the clay of the city, This sight is astonishing, a mountain of life, lush and silent, rising into the air. Travelers would pause in wonder, their voices hushed, their hearts stilled by beauty. Within the gardens, silence reigned, the noise of the marketplace, the chants of priests, the hammering of builders all faded away. In their place came softer sounds, the trickle of water flowing down stone channels, the rustle of leaves in warm breezes, the quiet song of birds nesting in branches. To walk there was to step outside of time, into a place where stone yielded to green, where the city gave way to the stillness of nature. Picture a queen walking slowly through the terraces. She wears a robe of linen embroidered with patterns of flowers. Her feet press against cool stone, her hands brush against the leaves of cypress and palm. She pauses to breathe in the scent of roses, to listen to the murmur of water. Around her, the gardens seem alive, a gift of love, a memory of distant hills, a miracle made from stone and silence. Whether the gardens truly existed remains uncertain. Some historians suggest they were not in Babylon at all, but in Nineveh, built by the Assyrian king Sennacherib. Others believe they were a dream of later writers, a poetic image born of Babylon's grandeur. The lack of ruins has left scholars puzzled. Yet the persistence of the story speaks to its power. For even if they were only a dream, they remain one of the most enduring dreams of humanity. The dream of gardens where none should grow, of life blooming in silence amid stone. The hanging gardens, real or imagined, remind us that memory is not only about what survives in earth and stone, but also what survives in story. Their silence is different from the silence of lost scrolls or burned libraries. It is the silence of mystery, the pause between certainty and imagination, the space where the mind wanders freely. Whether built or dreamed, they belong to the heritage of wonder, their whisper carried across centuries. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine walking in those terraces. The air is cool with shade, the sun softened by leaves above. Water glimmers as it flows down carved channels, birds sing softly in hidden branches. You walk slowly, each step echoing faintly on stone, surrounded by green. Beyond the walls the city hums, but here there is only stillness, only silence. The gardens may be lost, but in your imagination they bloom eternal. Great ziggurats and legendary gardens dominate the memory of Babylon, yet beneath them lay the ordinary life of thousands: farmers, merchants, craftsmen, priests, women at looms, children chasing each other in dusty courtyards. These were the true heartbeat of the city. Without them, the temples would have stood silent, the walls unmanned, the markets empty. To walk through Babylon in its height was to hear not only the chants of priests or the judgments of kings, but the hum of daily life, steady and unremarkable, yet enduring. At dawn, the city stirred slowly, the Euphrates glowed with first light, its waters rippling gold. Fishermen untied their boats, pushing them into the current, casting nets woven of palm fibers. Farmers led their donkeys out of the gates, heading for the fields along canals. Bakers lit their ovens, the smell of warm bread spreading through narrow streets. Children rubbed their eyes awake, helping carry water jars or chasing chickens from courtyards. The city, wrapped in mud brick and reed, began to breathe. Imagine walking through a quiet alley in the morning. The walls rise on either side, their surfaces marked with faint handprints from builders. Doorways are draped with woven mats, courtyards within filled with the sounds of grinding stones. Women bend over heavy querns, grinding barley into flour, their rhythm steady, their song soft. Clay jars line the walls, filled with oil, beer, or dates. In the corner, a child practices writing on a shard of broken pottery, tracing the wedge-shaped marks of cuneiform with a reed stylus. These are small moments, yet they are the essence of Babylon. The market square came alive by mid-morning. Merchants spread their goods on reed mats: dates, figs, onions, copper tools, woolen cloth. Donkeys brayed, their packs filled with goods from distant lands: lapis from Afghanistan, cedar from Lebanon, tin from Anatolia. Liars haggled, voices rising, hands gesturing. Scribes sat at small tables, ready to mark contracts in clay, recording weights, debts, and exchanges. Priests passed through, ensuring offerings were made, reminding all that trade was watched by the gods. Picture yourself in this marketplace. The sun is high, shadows sharp. You pause at a stall selling honey cakes, their sweetness filling the air. Beside you, a merchant shouts the merits of his copper blades, holding one high so it gleams in the light. Across the square, a farmer delivers baskets of dates, while a potter lays out rows of freshly fired vessels. The hum of voices blends with the bray of animals, the crack of hammers from nearby workshops, the distant chant of priests from the temples. The market is noisy, yet beneath the noise lies order, a rhythm of exchange, a pulse that sustains the city. In the workshops, craftsmen labored with quiet dedication. Bronzesmiths hammered metal into tools and ornaments, their forges glowing hot. Potters spun wheels, shaping clay into jars and bowls, their hands steady with years of practice. Weavers worked at looms, threads stretched, taut patterns slowly appearing. Each craft carried the memory of generations, techniques passed from master to apprentice, whispered instructions echoing through time. Homes of Babylon were simple but full of life. Built of mud brick, they often centered on a courtyard open to the sky. Rooms lined the edges, sleeping chambers, storage spaces, kitchens. In the evenings, families gathered in these courtyards, sharing meals of bread, lentils, dates, and beer. Stories were told, songs sung, children lulled to sleep beneath the stars. The walls kept out the dust and heat, but it was these small moments of gathering that gave Babylon its soul. Imagine sitting in one of these courtyards at twilight. The air cools, lamps glow softly, and the day's noise fades into calm. A father tells his children the story of Gilgamesh, his voice low and steady. A mother spins wool, her hands practiced, her song gentle. In the corner, a jug of beer is passed, laughter rising quietly. The city beyond the walls may be vast and restless, but here there is stillness, a rhythm as old as humanity. Daily life also carried its rituals of faith. Before meals, small offerings of bread or beer might be placed at a household altar. At festivals, families joined processions carrying flowers, singing hymns, walking in the shadow of temple walls. Even the simplest acts, a farmer watering his field, a baker kneading dough, a mother weaving cloth, were seen as part of a sacred order, bound to the rhythms of gods and cosmos. Though Babylon was a city of grandeur, it was also fragile. Floods threatened, wars loomed, droughts tested the people, yet the resilience of daily life endured. Families rebuilt homes, merchants restocked stalls, priests lit new fires on altars. Life moved steadily, a river of ordinary moments that gave the city strength. Babylon's greatness did not rest only in kings or wonders, but in the quiet persistence of its people. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine walking once more through Babylon's streets. The lamps glow, casting soft light on mud brick walls. The market is quiet now, its stalls empty. From courtyards, you hear faint songs, the laughter of children, the murmur of stories. Above, the stars glitter, reflected faintly in the slow waters of the Euphrates. The city breathes softly, its rhythm steady, its silence filled with life. When we look back across the centuries, Babylon appears first as a name, then as a place, then as an idea. It was a city of bricks and water, of kings and laws, of markets and myths. It was a place where priests read stars, where scribes pressed voices into clay, where families sang lullabies in courtyards, where lions strode across blue walls. It was also a city of conquest and surrender, of gardens that may or may not have bloomed, of rivers that whispered both life and loss. And now, it is a ruin, a memory, a silence that carries more than emptiness. Babylon's story is one of endurance, not in noise but in quiet persistence. The hanging gardens, whether real or imagined, remind us of beauty born from longing, of silence turned into greenery that swayed above stone. The laws of Hammurabi remind us of order, of silence carved into rules that sought to balance lives. The Ishtar gate reminds us of pride and devotion, of silence expressed in lions and dragons frozen in tile. The temples remind us of devotion, of silence filled with chant, of gods who listened in the stillness of flame. The canals remind us of endurance, of silence carried in water that nourished life for centuries. Each element of Babylon was an act of turning silence into permanence. Imagine walking through the city in its height. The Euphrates glimmers, canals spread like veins. The ziggurat rises square and steady, the processional way gleams with blue and gold. Priests watch the stars, scribes press tablets, merchants haggle, mothers hum lullabies, soldiers stand watch, children chase each other in dusty courtyards. The air hums with voices. Yet above it all lies a greater silence, the silence of time, of memory being pressed into clay, of moments already becoming history. Even in life, Babylon was filled with echoes of the eternal. Its fall to Cyrus reminds us that cities may endure by bending, that conquest need not always roar. Its slow decline reminds us that greatness can fade not with flame, but with sighs. With bricks carried away one by one, with temples slowly emptying, its rediscovery reminds us that silence can sleep for centuries and then awaken in whispers, a line uncovered, a tablet read, a myth restored. Babylon teaches us that silence is never absence, it is continuity in another form. Picture yourself now, standing among the ruins at twilight. The bricks beneath your feet are warm. The Euphrates flows faintly nearby, the horizon glows with the last light of day. The Ishtar gate is gone, the gardens are gone. The ziggurat is a mound, yet in your mind they rise again. You see lions gleam, you hear priests chant, you feel the cool shade of vines. Around you the silence is deep, but within it the city breathes. Babylon endures, not as it was, but as it is remembered. For Babylon is not only history, it is symbol, story, echo. It is pride and fall, wonder and warning, memory and myth. It is the city of law and of exile, of gardens and ruins, of silence and song. To speak its name is to summon thousands of ears, to touch a silence that has been filled with more voices than any single place could hold. As you close your eyes tonight, let Babylon settle into your dreams. Walk once more along the processional way beneath lions and dragons. Sit in a courtyard where a mother hums to her child. Stand atop a ziggurat beneath stars that wheel in silence. Wander among ruins where owls call in the night. Feel the rivers whisper steady and eternal. Babylon is gone, yet it is here in memory, in imagination, in silence. Its gardens are forgotten, its laws buried, its walls broken, but its silence is eternal. And in that silence, Babylon still speaks.